in coaching or in anything, as a parent, as a husband, the 2 T's, timing and tone. How do you say what you're saying, and when are you saying what you're saying?
I love that.
Sometimes is as important, than how much knowledge you think you're going to drop on somebody.
Welcome everyone to episode 8 of ITTV. I'm excited about this one for some selfish reasons and a bunch of other good reasons. But we've got Steve Merriman here with the Colorado Rockies. He is their pitching coordinator. And I know I posted in a couple places that we have a little bit of a rivalry because we're from the same hometown. When we ran into each other last February, so almost, 14 months ago, at On Base U, their inaugural pitching certification program in Arizona. And before it even started, we got talking, found out we're both from Mount Pleasant, Michigan. He went to the public school, I went to the private school, and we hit it off after that. So it's been a good time. I'm trying to think if there's anything other things to mention. If you're not following us on any social media, it's at Indiana Twins, just to keep it simple. We will upload all of these episodes up to YouTube and have timestamps below if you want to skip around to the questions. So you can just kind of expand the About section and skip around to those. So that is good. And let us know if you have any questions. You can also email us. It's indianatwins@gmail.com, and we'll help you out there. So let's kick it off. Actually, I did want to we'll get to that later. I guess let's jump into probably the most common question I got from some of our coaches and instructors and other guys. Steve, if you want to go kind of just down your career path.
Yeah, it's a long journey for people that are old, right? We've been around a long time. It's a long journey, but Mount Pleasant High School, and then went to Central Michigan University on a baseball scholarship, which is also there in Mount Pleasant. My parents actually had moved my senior year to Grand Rapids, Michigan, but I stayed there and was fortunate enough to play for Dean Kriener at CMU. He's the winningest coach in Central Michigan history, with over 1,000 wins, and put almost 90 players into professional baseball. And so I was fortunate enough to do that, and then was finishing my teaching degree after my playing was done, and was a high school baseball coach at Mount Pleasant High School, and I coached the freshman team. And at the same point in time, had been asked to sort of help with Central Michigan's JV program. They were the only JV program in the Midwest at the time, so I still got to work with college guys and was coaching freshmen, and moved down to the Detroit area when I got married, and we lived in Grosse Pointe, and I got asked to be the assistant coach at Oakland University. And so when it was a Division II school in the GLIAC Conference, it's a Division I school now, but at that time it was D2. And so then, a myriad of opportunities. I went to the University of Michigan. I've actually coached at the University of Michigan 3 separate times for a couple of different head coaches, actually all 3 of them up until most recently Eric Bakich. And then was at University of Toledo. My first opportunity in professional baseball, Ed Santa, Colorado Rockies scout in the Midwest, had asked me to be an associate scout for him. So I had done a little bit of that while I was a head coach at Macomb Community College. I was a head coach in junior college for 2 years. My first opportunity in pro ball went then to the bullpen job with the Detroit Tigers as the bullpen catcher. And so I, obviously had a lot of different responsibilities there. Buddy Bell was the manager in the late 90s. And so throw BP and review pitchers for incoming series, and sit in on pitcher catcher meetings, sit in on base running meetings and things like that. So I got exposed to a lot of different opportunities. And because of my background, obviously having coached in college prior to going to that role, I had been on the road as a recruiting coordinator, had been on the road as a recruiter, and being a head coach in junior college where you do it all. So I had a lot of experiences. I went to Major League Baseball Scout School. The Rockies sponsored me to MLB Scout School through the Major League Scouting Bureau, which doesn't exist now. I think going on probably 4 years now that they don't exist in the same entity. But at that time, it was one of the largest scout schools that they had ever held. There were 60 some guys and girls, males and females in the school, and I finished very well. And that again because of background and having recruited, and when we went to see players and evaluating and writing reports. Then I got an opportunity following that with the New York Mets. I was a pitching coach through the minor league system. The New York Mets, became a rehab pitching coordinator after a couple different stops as a pitching coach, and went to Arizona Diamondbacks as a minor league pitching coach. Then to scouting for 2 years for the Scouting Bureau in the Midwest, and then back to coaching in college at Michigan, then to the Kansas City Royals as an assistant pitching coordinator with, at that time, Steve Foster, who was the Major League bullpen coach with Kansas City, became the pitching coordinator and asked me to be his assistant. So I did that for 3 years, and then to the Chicago Cubs as an assistant pitching coordinator, to now the Rockies last year as a pitching coach in Double-A, and now in my new role as a pitching coordinator. So it's a long and winding road, one that started out as a high school coach. I've also coached, when I was a scout, I coached for Diamond Sports Academy, Diamonds in Grand Rapids, Michigan, one of the top travel programs in the state of Michigan. And so I coached 15U. I also helped with all of the practices indoors in the off season and all that stuff. So I've been very, very fortunate to have a wide range of experiences.
Yep. Is that the program that you're still helping out occasionally?
Yes, I still do lessons in the off season. I think that's a big part of learning as a coach. Grassroots type work, things that a 15 or a 14-year-old does is very different than even a 17 or an 18 that is maybe more of an elite type athlete at that age. And then, obviously with pro guys. So it's a great opportunity and a great experience to have that, to work with different levels of guys. So I love being involved in that.
Yeah. Are you trying to get more light right now?
I am.
You don't have no light bulb in there? No, that just drowns you out.
I do. Is that better? I can go. You want me to turn the light on?
Yeah, turn the light on. It was real bright when we started talking. Oh, look at that.
There you go. How's that?
Uh-oh. Man, that's high quality.
There you go. So,
what was the time frame from being a freshman coach to then getting your first opportunity in pro ball? How many years was that?
Oh goodness. Well, from high school, I went to the college game. So I was in the college game 2 years, and then got the opportunity to help out as an associate scout. They used to call him a bird dog scout a long time ago. They don't do that too much anymore, but so then I was the head coach at a junior college. So I was still probably 4 years in college while I was still getting my opportunity on the scouting side. And then, I then had continued to stay on the college side another 3 years. So it was like 5 years total before I went into my first pro job with the Tigers.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm trying to give because we've got a handful of guys that either are graduating this year or have just graduated in the last 3 years. I'm sure a lot of people watching too, it's the same boat where it's like, wanting to get into whether it's a D1 coaching job or getting into pro ball. And it's just like, you got to start somewhere. And I think what's funny too is listening to you talk about that. I was thinking about it today when I was thinking of some questions. Is it's the cool new thing is that like all these college coaches are jumping up into the pro ranks and all that. And it's like, it's not completely new. Maybe as big of a jump as some of them for a couple, but I mean, that's, I assume, been happening for the longest time.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, and I don't think I was I don't think I was a pioneer necessarily by any means on that, because I know there have been a lot of college guys that have done, pro jobs. You go back to some old time guys out on the West Coast that were college coaches from junior colleges out in California, guys that I know that have gone from college into the pro ranks. So it's not really new. Yeah. Baseball, especially Major League Baseball, is a Me Too type league. They're gonna chase the shiny object in a lot of ways, and so and that's not meant to be a knock. It is just kind of the way things go. I think people are willing to look at options. Look, you want to take guys who know how to teach. I still think an ability to teach is a tremendous asset for anybody, an ability to communicate. The way to communicate has changed an awful lot over the last 25, 30 years, I would say. With the advent of great programs that do a lot of research and have put out research, probably more so in the last 8 to 10 years, which is a good thing. So knowing how to communicate, when to say what you have to say. Gary LaRocque is a good friend of mine. He's the assistant general manager with the St. Louis Cardinals. And Gary was with the Mets when I was with the Mets. And one of the things that he used to say, and I've used this a lot, and that is, in coaching or in anything, as a parent, as a husband, the 2 T's, timing and tone. How do you say what you're saying, and when are you saying what you're saying?
I love that. Sometimes
is as important, than how much knowledge you think you're going to drop on somebody. So how you say what you say and when you say what you say really is a great thing. And I think right now in the game of baseball, teaching is still key, and it's still king. And it's knowing that you have a pretty big tool belt that you can draw not only from experiences, but draw on the things that will help today's player. So
yeah. So kind of to follow up on the timing and tone, because I try to help out. Not that I've been coaching for a long time, but just newer coaches with some of that same type of advice. But because you've been around so many coaches at this point, do you see kind of the learning curve start to level out at like a certain age, or so many years coaching, or so many years in pro ball? Because obviously everyone takes, a little bit of a learning curve to figure out kind of their groove and their timing and their tone, all that stuff. Is, again, for those guys that are getting into coaching at any level, what can they expect? Because you can't expect to be perfect right away, but I mean, how long until you're thinking like at this point, you should be getting the understanding of how to communicate a little bit better?
Yeah, it is a learning curve on experiences, but you have to have experiences to have that learning curve. And it's about understanding people. It's about understanding your athlete. It's about understanding the player that's in front of you. At lower levels, I remember at 15U, kids can't drive. So you have to keep parents included in communications. As much as you want to try to wean players away from parents taking care or taking over everything, which parents have to learn how to do that as well. That's not an easy thing, but as the coach, you set that tone, and you only learn how to set that tone by knowing how to deal with those situations. For instance, if you need to put out a daily practice schedule, or you need to put out a schedule for the month of what you're going to do from practices to games, you need to make sure your athletes have it, but you also need to make sure your parents have it. So, and you need to create an avenue for parents to be able to communicate with you. If the only time a parent sees you is at practice, then they're going to come to you at practice. And that doesn't always look good, because now a parent's coming to you and they might have the most genuine, sincere question they want to ask you. But everybody else perceives it as they're fighting for their kids' playing time by coming and asking you a question at the dugout or on the field. So as a coach, you need to set when the time to communicate with you would be for those lower levels. You know, that just comes to experience. You learn those things as you go. I mean, when I was coaching in college, I didn't have parents coming to me when I was coaching at the University of Michigan, or I was coaching at University of Toledo, or as the head coach at Macomb Community College. I didn't have parents coming to me asking questions about their kid. But I also set the tones with the meetings that I did have, both with my athletes and when parents were involved in recruiting processes, so that they knew what they could expect. So you have to lay that expectation out and then create the opportunities that you want for communication. And it doesn't always happen the way you want, but I think if you lay it out, if you say, hey, 24 hours after you think you have a problem with something, you want to communicate with me, you come to me 24 hours later, here's how I would like to start the conversation, or here's what you do. Send me an email. And then we can arrange a time to get on the phone to have a conversation. So you have to have a process in place, and you learn how to do that by having those experiences and by setting those up. It changes a little bit as you migrate through levels. You know, the only level I haven't coached at is Division III. I've been I've been everywhere else. And it changes as you go levels. I've been in rookie ball, and I've been all the way up to the big leagues. So, you know, I treat upper level players like adults, as they should be treated like adults. I don't have to scream and yell at older guys. That doesn't accomplish anything. So, but you don't learn all of those different pieces except for having experiences. You have to be willing to make sacrifices. If you're a high school coach, or you're a coach of a travel program, travel team, and you want to coach at another level, whether that be NAIA, junior college, or whatever, you have to be willing to make sacrifices. And there are lots of sacrifices that have to be made to get to where you want to be, both from your own learning curve as well as how you know you're going to get to that spot you want to be at.
Of the ones you're willing to share, what was one of the larger struggles and sacrifices you had to do? Or you had to take?
Oh gosh, I'm willing to share a lot of those.
So what was one of the bigger ones?
Sometimes it wasn't just mine. Sometimes, you know, it was my family's, it was my wife's. I remember a time as the main recruiting guy, and at that time they didn't really call it recruiting coordinator at Michigan, but I was on the road a lot. I think I was home basically about 4 days a month for about a 3-month span. You know, I was at the area code games in California. I was at Perfect Game things. I was at that time it was called Team One. Some people might not remember that, but Team One was running events all over the country, much like Perfect Game. And I think actually Perfect Game bought them out, but whatever. You were always on the road. I was in Youngstown at the Youngstown tournament. I was at all the major tournaments in Indiana and Illinois and Ohio, Michigan, and all that. And those are sacrifices. You don't get to see your family. You don't, as my kids got older, I didn't always get to be at events, things that they were doing. All 3 of my kids were college athletes. My daughter now is still a college athlete, playing softball in college. And so there are things I would love to be able to have been able to do and see, but we didn't get to. The other sacrifices you have to make, you have to be willing to put in a lot of time. You're not just going to show up and get your office and, you know, go sit in an office and think it's great. You're going to have to be available to your athletes. You're going to have to be on the road recruiting. You're going to have to be educating yourself on a lot of the things that are a part of being a quality teacher in the game today. So there's a countless number of things, but those are the big ones, I think.
Yeah.
Time.
So yeah, you talked about being a parent. I know we've got a lot of parents on here too. What's your best? I'm trying to think. Let's go this. I'll jump around a little bit because I had this one later on. I don't think I shared this one with you, so it's not meant to stump you. But
yeah,
what's your advice? You don't have to go too far in depth, but for youth, then high school and college, and then even into independent and pro ball. What's for those different stages? What's your advice to parents that have got a son who's just in it?
Yeah. I think it's a great question, and it's one that needs to be addressed a lot. I think all parents have, for the most part, I'm going to say a high percentage of parents have good intentions, and they don't know what to do. And when they don't know what to do or what to say, they end up finding themselves going down roads that they shouldn't go down. For instance, let's take a travel organization and a 15U team. And let's say there's two 15U teams. There's an A and a B, okay? And the parents want the kid to be on the 15U A team, not the 15U B team. So they try to maneuver to get their kid into that situation. Well, that's the worst thing that can be done for the player themselves. Why? Because the player knows in I think a majority of cases where they fit and their level. They want opportunities. Don't get me wrong. Every player, I don't care if it's A, B, C, D, or purple polka dot team, they want opportunities to play. And they want to be given a fair shot when they're doing that. But parents sometimes try to push kids into situations that their player can't develop in because they don't get enough opportunities.
Right.
So parents need to understand what's the best opportunity for my son or my daughter to play the most that they can to see where they are ability-wise. And as they progress, how do they, well, should we move him up a level? Should he play, he's 15, but should we play 16U? Or he's a good 16-year-old, should we play 18U? One of the things that we talk about, even in moving guys in pro ball, and I think it should be no different in travel organizations or anything else, high school, did they dominate that level they were at? And by dominate, that means dominate in every phase of the game. Were they a leader and on time for everything they were supposed to be on time for? Were they doing the things they needed to do in the classroom? Did they, you could say, well, dominate means on the field. Not always. I mean, it has to if you're going to move up to a 17 or 18U level to get exposure. But you need to have a certain batting average, right? Now, batting average for most college coaches are going to look at that and go, okay. His ERA, okay. We don't look at that a whole lot in development through the minor leagues. I think ERA is a bad stat to look at. There's a lot of bad stats to look at, a lot of bad numbers, but parents need to understand that they need to have the best opportunity for their child to get experience. The only way you get experience is by being on the field. So if it's about playing at this level and to see where they're at, then they need to be given that and put in that situation. Communicate with your athlete. I know all the parents right now are going, oh yeah, right, my athlete doesn't, my 15-year-old, 14-year-old, 13-year-old, 16-year-old, they don't talk to me. Well, maybe you have to look at the environment you create for communication. I mean, if the first thing that happens is you're yelling from the bench or you're yelling from the stands about what they're doing in a game, well, of course they're not going to talk to you when they get in the car after the game. Create an environment where they can communicate with you on their time. Find out from them when's the best time to communicate with you about things. I had a rule with my three kids who were, like I said, all college athletes. Daughter was at Michigan State University, son Division II school in Ohio, daughter Division II in Ohio as well. And my rule, even as they were coming through, was, hey, let's talk about what you want to talk about for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is all we got to talk about it with what you want to talk about, whether you're frustrated, angry, happy, disappointed, questioning, whatever you want for 5 minutes. At the end of the 5 minutes, done. If there's something else you want to talk about, we talk about it. But too many parents want to talk about it right away. You should have done this and you should have done that, and start pointing out the 15 things that they felt they should have done. And, you know, that's not creating the right environment for communication to take place. Same thing as a coach. And this is personal preference, I hate after game meetings. Hate them. Why? Because we're going to start to talk about things right after the game when players at a certain level, at 15 or 14U, certain players at 14U or 15U, all the way up, probably no need to have a conversation after the game. 8U, up to that point, okay, I understand there are probably some good moments to teach right afterwards for young players. But let's face it, those players have tuned you out in 2 minutes. They're done. The game's over. They're moved on. You're wasting breath. Individually address things during the game is probably way more beneficial than trying to address the entire group after a game. And older players, they know what mistakes. They know they missed the base. They know they missed the cutoff man. They know they didn't make a pitch. They know they took a wrong approach to the plate when the situation was there for a hitting opportunity. So, you know, all of those things have to come into play for parents, and they have to know how to create the right environment.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see if any of our coaches take that advice and try it out, because I'm trying to think of all the conversations that have been had after every game I've ever been a part of, and if there were big takeaways. Now, obviously, the coach has maybe a notepad of some notes and things, but they're going to take that to the next practice, and, you know, the practice is going to be organized specific to those notes. But it seems so simple, but that just makes a whole lot of sense. I guess it gives a good amount of time for the coach to blow off steam, but you're right. I mean, it's a really good point.
Well, you know what you could do in travel situations, you play 2 games in a day. You play the 8 o'clock game, then you come back and play the 1 o'clock game. Let them go have their lunch and come back and meet before the next game to talk about 1 or 2 things. Keep it really simple with what you talk about. I do that with our pro athletes, with our big league guys that I talk to, our A-ball guys. Try to keep it really simple with what you want to address, or let them have more feedback. Let them tell you where they're at, and I think it's just keeping it simple. You know, it's an easier thing for them to remember.
What's a piece of advice you would give? So last year when you were pitching coach in AA, what was just an example of a time where you pulled a guy off to the side, either after a game, before a game, and what types of things are you talking to that guy about?
Well, I had a wide range of guys. I had guys that had pitched in the big leagues with me in AA. And I had guys that had been in other organizations to high levels, AAA, and had experience. I mean, those are 26 to 27, 28-year-old guys. You have to treat each guy differently. You have to treat each guy the way that they need to be treated. There isn't a blanket way to treat every player. You have to learn them. You have to ask questions. You have to spend time getting to know them. The first month of the season for me as a pitching coach, even last year, I didn't tell my guys a whole lot. I didn't say a whole lot. I watched and I observed. Almost the entire month of April, I spent, and I was in big league camp in spring training, and so I didn't get to see a lot of my guys early on because I wasn't there. And I went back to the minor leagues after being in big league camp and had about 2 weeks with the AA working group. And some of those guys weren't with me. They were going to go down, or they were moved up, or whatever it was. So I just spent time watching. Who are they? How did they handle pressure situations? How did they like to be talked to? How do they learn? What's their learning style? What's their effort level in different routines that they had. So I spent the first month learning my athletes. Then May rolled around and I began to talk to guys. Some guys like to be addressed with things prior to a game. Some guys like to be talked to the next day. In the game, for me, now this is at the pro level, and I don't know that it should be much different anywhere else, but it's personal for who the player is or the coach. But I would typically go to the catcher first in between innings. If there were things that happened in an inning, I would go to the catcher first to talk about what they were seeing and what they were thinking. We don't call pitches in the pro game. I've called pitches. I've got lots of systems for calling pitches that I used in college, but we don't call pitches. I spent a lot of time with my catchers talking to them about what they wanted to do with certain guys and why they wanted to do certain things with certain guys, because once it became the two of them, it had to be the two of them. I might ask questions to get an idea of the thought process. I would then go to the catcher and give him a thought process that I've seen or something that I noticed with a hitter, something that I saw with a sequence, because I had a system that I would keep track of everything in game. And then I would go to the pitcher if that were the type of pitcher that he was. I don't typically run right to the pitcher always unless there's something that I see. I might ask about how they feel. I would wait for them, and most of the time the guys would come they would ask me in between innings, hey, what do we got with the next three guys, or what do you see from that inning? Things like that. But I think it's really individual. You have to learn your athletes to know how to talk to them.
Yep. Okay, and the next one, we're going to jump a little bit more and do some advice for the actual pitchers. So I'm going to go 4 different levels. So we got youth, high school, college, and then independent or pro ball. And then so that's 4 levels. And then you've got 4 categories. You can only pick one category per age group to give advice on. So the categories are training advice, mental advice, pitching, just like specifically pitching, or social or academic advice. So I'll let you kind of think about that a little bit. For those of you watching, I've got a couple of questions. Are we going to talk pitching? We're going to talk pitching right now. We're going to kind of jump around to coaching and to, parents and that kind of stuff. And then some of the other questions that we've got getting more technical, but which one do you want to start with? Which level?
Well, and we can keep it short with each one. Let's start with the youth level and go straight up.
Okay, so youth, training, mental, pitching, or social/academic?
Well, I think depending on what age you're talking as a youth
14
level.
And down, you pick.
14 and down. I would say 14 and down would probably be more of the academic first.
Okay.
Because guys are making decisions on colleges by the time they're freshman and sophomore in high school. So 14-year-old's a freshman in some cases, right? So academically, where are they? Because if they don't have the right grades, it's tough to maybe do what their abilities would allow them to do. And then the next thing I think you'd probably want to go to that would be their training.
Do you want to hit on all of them and be quick? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying as a youth player, the first thing I would focus on with him would be academics. The second thing I would focus with that youth player would be what they're doing from a training standpoint. How are they spending their time?
I was going to restrict you. I was going to squeeze you and say you can only pick one piece of advice.
Those? Okay. Yeah.
So you've already wasted
14 and under, I'm sticking with academic. I would hit that most important.
I like that because a lot of times you talk to 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds that are sophomores and juniors, and they're like, oh, academics is really important. I'm really trying to focus, and really it's probably already too late. So I like that. I mean, you could tell a 6th grader, hey, if you're at all thinking that you're wanting to, just even to go to college. All right, so next level is high school. You can pick training, mental, or pitching advice.
I would say it would probably be training.
Okay.
What are you doing at the high school level from a training standpoint? Do you understand how to fill your different buckets in a training situation? If you are trying to hit the weights heavy, which I think guys need to have a time frame in high school where they're getting after the weights. If you're getting after that with pretty high intensity, you probably shouldn't be doing a lot of high intensity baseball stuff. Throwing intensity should be very low. You want to make sure that the training mechanisms that guys are using fit at what time of year they are in.
Yeah.
And I believe that there's a time to hit the weights hard. I believe that there's a time to begin to ramp up what you're doing from a baseball throwing perspective. But you have to know how to balance those things. At what time of year are we talking about? So I would go training with the high school kid.
I love that you said buckets, because our president, Jason, who I'm sure is listening, talks about buckets or filling your cup and the different levels. And if you're missing that training component, that's a big part of your buckets. All right, college level. We've got mental or specifically pitching. You pick one. Which one do you want to give some advice on?
I in college, I would say it would be probably on the pitching side of it. There would be, I think a greater opportunity to talk to guys about what they're doing and how they're doing. It's difficult to try to put these into one specific place, as you get it with what I'm going to say. There's a blending of some of these things that will overlap depending on where they are at the time of year. But I'm being limited, and I get it. That's cool. But I would say in college, the pitching advice would be where I would go with some guys at that level. That's what I would do.
Well, I guess maybe I should have explained the question, because I was trying to get fancy with the question here. It's not that one of these is more important than the other. It's that I'm just making you give pitching advice at whatever level you want, or mental advice at whatever level you want. So it's not that this one is more important at college. So if we talk pitching advice for college kids, just what's something you want to give them advice on?
In terms of pitching? So
just pitching. It's very general, but you got college kids. What would you tell them they need to focus on with just pitching?
Well, the game has been chasing velocity now for probably about 8 years. So same thing with the high school, that high school junior, or sophomore even, they're chasing velocity. So the rub for most people is, well, if he's not throwing 91, he's not getting even looked at as a Division I athlete. Well, it's while that might be true, okay, and I believe it to be true. I'm not saying it isn't true. I think that in most cases, those college kids, have to have the right training methodologies that allow them to do a few things from a pitching perspective. And when I say pitching, I mean the ability to pitch. That means I understand several facets of pitching. I understand first and foremost location. I understand number 2 for me is movement of a pitch. Number 3 for me would be changing of speeds, and then, number 4 is in the ability to know how to utilize those things. How am I going to utilize all of those 3 pieces? And I get the argument that, well, if a guy doesn't throw hard, none of those things matter. Well, there's a lot of levels of college baseball. It doesn't mean they're all pro guys, but I think that their ability to understand who they are as a pitcher. What is your arsenal? Do you even know what an arsenal is? Do you know how to use an arsenal? I mean, we talk to our guys about essentially several different types of arsenals. And I'm talking about our rookie guys all the way up to our big league guys. I've had several conversations with our major league pitchers to talk about it. Steve Foster, our major league pitching coach with the Rockies, is tremendous at talking to guys about what it is they want to do, how do they want to do what they want to do, what do they think they are, So I think from a pitching perspective, my response to college guys would be, understand what you're capable of and then maximize what you're good at. Don't worry about what you're not good at. I can't throw a changeup. Okay, do something different. I can't spin a breaking ball. Okay, do something different. What are you good at? I'm really good. I have a really good fastball. My fastball is 90 to 93. Great. Use your fastball. I don't have a changeup, then add and subtract, or front to back is an arsenal. Front to back your fastball. There was a time when Roger Clemens was pitching many years ago that he was #1 in Major League Baseball for adding and subtracting with his fastball. It was about 17-mile-an-hour differential on just the fastball. So if his top fastball was 97, that's telling you what he was throwing a fastball at. He might have pulled something off a two-seamer. Tom Glavine was the same way. There's a lot of guys that understand. So being able to pitching advice is know who you are, what are you good at, what's your arsenal. Are you an up-down guy? Are you an east-west guy? Are you a front-to-back guy, or are you a diagonal guy? Meaning I'm using diagonals in the strike zone because I have a really sweeping breaking ball, and I'm going to use the diagonal down and in to either righty or lefty, whatever you are, or I'm going to use the diagonal up and in to the lefty, and I'm going to go down to that corner. So I'm going to use that diagonal. So know who you are, know what you're good at, and know what your arsenal allows you to do.
Well, that's good. It's amazing. Your answer was so much better when I gave you the correct question. And I didn't have you confused. So now, again, not because we're talking about independent guys or pro guys or whatever it is. This is not to say that this is the most important, although maybe it is. But just from a mental standpoint, because that's the one we have left, what's your advice to that level of guys?
Yeah, and I think that it varies from level to level. So rookie ball, I've always said that from rookie ball to AA, it's 80-20. It's 80% physical, 20% mental, which means that 80% of what I'm doing with them is about their physical, the way their body moves, what are some things that they do within their deliveries, because everybody's delivery is different. What are they doing within that I need to make sure that we focus on? And then 20% from those levels is on the mental side. Begin teaching them the importance of the mental aspects of proper rest, proper nutrition, understanding thinking correctly, how to think, what to think, self-talk, goals. How do you self-talk on the mound? What are some strategies you use in game, pitch to pitch, that kind of thing. From AA to major leagues, you flip the 80-20. Yeah. It's 80% mental and 20% physical. Because at the major league level, you have a developed routine. You understand the importance of rest and eating correctly. Feeding your body the right way with things. How you talk to yourself, the way that you sift through information. I think it's really imperative that a piece of the mental aspect is sifting through information. There's a ton of information that guys can get. Even 14U can Google stuff, and you get 5,000 pieces of information on, whatever technique you want to talk about. Mm-hmm. How do I sift through information as a mental skill? What do I say yes to? What do I say no to? What do I spend more time focusing on? Those kinds of things. And the 20% physical. There's still physical things that happen with major leaguers. Yep. And it's, for us with the Rockies, it's a monthly thing. We look at how they're moving and we screen them and we do things, much like every organization, but we look at guys on a monthly basis. I look at pitchers about every 3 outings as a starter, and about every 5 outings as a reliever. When you begin to look at differences or changes and what's happening. So that's how I would answer that.
I like the 80-20. All right, let me jump around here some more. I don't think I'm going to get to all the questions because there's a ton. I was telling you beforehand, this was the most amount of questions I've got going into one of these so far. So it's a special shout out to you. Let's see. I don't want to go too general. Let's go more lighthearted.
Okay.
Best part about your current role?
Best part about my current role is I get to have an impact on 7 coaches. I get to have an impact on players. I enjoy helping guys maximize their potential. That's both as a coach and players. I get to interact with our other coordinators. We bounce ideas off of each other. I learn from some great guys. Jerry Weinstein, probably one of the top, catching guys in baseball. Along with a guy you're going to have on not in a few days.
Yep.
Barksdale. I mean, those are some pretty good guys, and I've been fortunate enough to be around a lot of good guys. Mark Stripmatter is our catching coordinator with the Rockies. Just how they teach, how they talk. I get to be around those guys. So the greatest things about my job are getting to have an impact on coaches. I'm responsible for helping to hire our coaches, and then obviously our players, getting to impact our players. So that's the greatest things that I get to do. So
Yeah. This one goes back to, again, with coaching. I had someone ask, what's your end goal in coaching? We had a conversation on the phone a few months back. We kind of both back and forth along the same lines of not that there was one ideal, perfect end goal with baseball. And the journey is just a great time on the way. It's got its ups and downs, but how would you answer, and kind of like we had talked about, or maybe it's changed a little bit, how would you answer what your end goal is in baseball?
My end goal in baseball is to try to impact in a positive manner, both on the field and in life, the guys that I'm responsible for or around. Steve Foster, our Major League pitching coach, talks a lot about things that we need to focus on as coaches and engage and equip and encourage and edify. All of those things he talks about are an important part of what we do as coaches. When you think about engaging players, that's building relationships. You talk about encouraging players. It's about how to help them go through difficulties when some of them aren't sure they can do it, and just edify, lifting up others around you. Now, I'm very fortunate and blessed to be around a lot of guys in an organization that care about each other, from our front office people, the analytics team, our video people, to our Major League bullpen coach, to our assistant coordinator or our co-coordinator, Doug Linton, tremendous guy, great learner. I mean, I'm blessed to get to be around all of those kinds of people. And when you engage people, you equip them to do what they do well, you encourage them, you edify them, those are the things that matter. So that's the end game, is to try to be as positive an impact on helping guys to reach their goals, whatever that is. If it's a coach that wants to be a big league coach, I want to help them do that. If it's a player to get to the big leagues, obviously that's what we want. I want to help them do that. That's the end game for me.
The reason I like that answer, and it was powerful for me, is because when I talked to you about it, because I was curious, it's because I resonated with your answer. But so often you hear like, okay, this guy's, he's destined to be an assistant GM, or he's going to be a big league coach, or he wants to do this, or they want to do this. And so often you're told you need to have a goal. It needs to be a concrete goal. And there's benefit to that, but I think there's also some calming in that some people like yourself and like myself, I mean, the end goal, like you said, it's just to help guys get where they want to be and to be able to teach. And it resonated a lot with me. So I thought it was a powerful answer, that not everyone has an exact, like, this is where I want to be.
Yeah. I've always kind of felt like a couple of things. Number one, that if if I'm worried about where I want to be eventually, then I'm going to miss some things that are really important in front of me right now.
Yeah.
If I say, oh, I want to be a major league coach, or I want to be an assistant GM, or I want to be a farm director, then I think I'm going to do a pretty crappy job at what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And that means that an A-ball guy calls me and says, hey, Steve, I'm going through my throwing program, and, here's how I'm feeling, or what should I do? I'm going to miss the important stuff. The second thing is I've always sort of believed and have lived my life in a way that I just believe that God, for me and my family, is in control of things. And if I'm trying to control everything and where I go and how I manipulate something or somebody, then I'm stepping ahead of who's really ultimately in charge. I want to give that to him. I believe I'll get put where I'm supposed to be, and if I'm doing the right things, guys will get better, and coaches will get better, and everything else takes care of itself and happens for a reason.
I love that. All right, this one came to mind. This might be interesting. I'm kind of curious. What's been in more recent years, maybe not just because there's a lot of memories, but what has been for you kind of a like, wow, this is really, really cool? Whether it's getting free hot dogs or meeting somebody, or what's been like, wow, where you step back and you're just like, holy crap, I can't believe this just happened. I know don't give me the cliche answer of like,
no,
I'm very fortunate to be in, because I get that. But I want to hear, like, for the audience and me too, I'm like, what's been like, whoa, for me? For you?
I think, and without being specific with certain specific people, because this has happened a lot along the way in my journey. Very prominent guys that the baseball circles know who these guys are, because some of them are Hall of Famers now that I've had the pleasure to work with. When a Hall of Famer or a guy that has done, very well in his career, wants to reach out to you and ask you questions about some things they're doing, or ask your advice about something, that has been that's one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me over my coaching career, to have those guys that are very accomplished and very good at what they do to be open and ask for my opinion or my thought on something, or ask me to help them with something over a period of time. That's tremendous. I think the other thing that's tremendous that happens is that I've had a number of guys reach out to me on Twitter, call me. I had a guy call me this past year, pitched in the big leagues, that I got the fortunate to be around in college, pitched in the big leagues, reached out to me this past spring and called me and just said, hey, coach, was thinking about you. Hadn't talked to you in a while. I wanted to thank you for everything you helped me do in my career and what I'm doing now. And he's with a major league team now in a different role, but or a major league club, I should say. And that kind of thing is cool too. When players reach out to you and say, hey, can you help me do this? Or I've got some college guys that I've helped that were players that are now coaching that have reached out. Those are the cool things when guys come back. And so I would say to the players that are listening, reach out to that 8U or 9U coach, that you really glean something from, and thank them.
I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, when you first get into coaching, within the first couple of years, someone's going to thank you out of the blue, and you're like, gosh, that feels awesome.
Yeah.
All right, let's see what else I've got.
I've had the place where a couple guys have tried to buy me a car to thank me, and I've said, no, I'm good. That's my job. That's happened.
Buy a car?
Yep. I had a guy in 2006. He was pitching in the big leagues with the Mets. He came to me because at that time I was the rehab pitching coordinator, and got to work with him and helped him with some real conversation, real talk about things. And he went back to the big leagues that year and did very, very well. And I don't think it's only because of what I said to him, but I I think it's about perspective. He got real talk and perspective, because he had been with another major league club and said, hey, this guy was my pitching coach with this team, and how come he never said that to me? And I said, well, I don't know. I can't tell you why, but he wanted to buy me a car. And I said, it's my job, my man. Thank you.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I've definitely never been thanked to that level. Maybe I need to be working on how well I impact people.
Oh, I don't know.
That's crazy. All right, let's see. I want to get a couple more baseball-specific ones, just nitty-gritty. Yep. So let me look through some of these other ones. How do you have guys, and again, I know it's very specific, so you can just kind of pick an example. How do you have guys work on command?
Yeah. Our pro guys work on command in a lot of different ways. And understand that, depending on what level they are, there are certain things that certain guys need. I'll give you an example. We have a guy that's pitched in the big leagues for a couple of years, gets to certain points of outings where really struggles. And so during some of his bullpen sessions, we're actually trying to be distractive during that bullpen session. In a way that we're forcing him to think about what he does, how to execute a pitch. If his struggle is getting the slider to get to a certain location or getting the fastball to a certain location, we go through scenarios, counts, batters, pitch to pitch, saying things that make him have to focus, or saying things to try to distract him so that he makes his focus better. Some guys that we have at lower levels use, some different weighted balls in command situations to try to get some feel to what they're trying to create. We use some technology to help guys better understand what they're doing to help them with their bullpens. We chart bullpens. We script some bullpens. There's a lot of different things that can be done, but again, it goes back to what does that athlete tell you that they need? What does that player tell you that they need? And being able to do that with what that guy needs is huge. The other way that we kind of work on and talk about command comes from what's going on in the mental side of the game. Especially on the pro level. What's the thought processes? What are you thinking? Are you thinking, in the wrong area? Meaning, are you thinking over the rubber, thinking physically, which is the wrong area for command? And so we try to dissect how guys are approaching pitch to pitch, what they're doing, what it is they want to accomplish. Once they know their arsenal, once they know who they are, what they're good at, then we can really begin to drill down into how to use their stuff in a way that helps them. If you can simplify how a guy is going to use his arsenal, it becomes better, right? Hey, if I throw 3 fastballs to this location and I can hit this location, there's nothing wrong with throwing 3 fastballs to that location. You could say, oh, that's crazy. Hitters are going to time you. You know what? The best hitters are hitting 250. That's now major league average, 255, 260. Okay. That's less than 1 for 3. So, the ability to pinpoint what you're going to do with pitches and how to use your stuff and not trying to do too much with your stuff, keeping it simple. So that's how we do a lot of that with command.
Yeah. With keep it simple, is that because there's so much technology that everyone's trying to juggle now. There's so many different ways of teaching that are becoming popular. There's books, there's articles, there's videos and all that. Would you say at the end of the day, you're trying to take all that, synthesize it on the coaching end so that you can then communicate back to your original point about communication, the simplest thing for them to be able to understand it all?
If you know your athlete, you know your player, you know how they learn, you know how they like to be talked to, then you will know which one of those things or how much of some of those things, because it could be multiple. It could be talking through some of the numbers. It could be talking through some of the technology. It could be, but it's still kept very simple, but you know how to teach with it. You know, we have a guy that's got some big league time with a couple of organizations. He knows exactly what his spin axis needs to be, and he'll tell you exactly what it is. Well, we can talk. If that's how he likes to be talked to, then that's how you talk to him about where he's at. Are there things that happen physically that put him either in the right spin axis or not? Absolutely. His intent, and I think the word intent has been, you know, I think misused at some levels. I think there is intent when you're training and what you're trying to get from that. But when I'm pitching, to have that same intent that I would have as a training methodology, that's going to be a problem. I mean, what my intention is different than my intent. You know, because intention means there's multiple pieces that go with it. How I want to tunnel pitches, or how I want to use my arsenal, okay, is a simpler way than tunneling. That I need to know how my athlete responds, and I can talk to him within those methods. So you have to be, as a coach, more understanding of a lot of those things to know how and when to use what you're using. You know, back to the timing and tone.
I'm writing that down because I'd already forgotten it. I know I'm going to watch this again, but I'm writing this down. I don't want to forget that question. There was another thing I wanted. A couple things that I don't want to forget to ask you.
Okay.
I'm going to try and wrap this up here in the next like 15 minutes or so.
Okay.
Let's see if because I got a lot of questions on technology, so I'm going to go one more on that route. Okay. Let's see. How much? I'm going to go from the player aspect because we've done so much on coaching. For players out there, because I know, you know, you've been introduced to a lot of the technology out there, whether you've used it in different capacities or just been exposed to it. So from the player side, how should, if you had it, let's say, and you might have had these presentations with rookie ball guys, how do you try to advise them to navigate technology? Because it might be brand new to them. They might think it's shiny and all that. What's your best advice to those guys? And it might even be youth guys who at their tribal organization have a brand new piece of advice or brand new device. What's your advice to them on how to navigate all that? Because it can be great and exciting, but. Yeah,
good question. And I can tell you, one of the things that we do in getting to know our players is to you know, talk to them, have sit down conversations where we, you know, discuss things, or we get an idea of where they're coming from. You know, where have they been? You know, in the pro side of things, you have guys coming from SEC programs where they have labs, down to, you know, junior college guys that have heard about a Rapsodo but have no idea what it is or what it does, much less how any of the stuff that comes from it. And so we really have to get to know our athlete. What have they been exposed to? What do they know? What do they like to know? What have they dove in on their own to get an idea about? And then, you know, bringing it in when they need it. One of the analogies that I use a lot, and it fits with today's player, especially younger players, youth, college, and some lower level minor league guys. But if I'm in a teaching session in a bullpen, and I've got multiple guys in a bullpen, and one guy falls over and collapses, and I start mouth-to-mouth CPR. You know, actually, you don't do mouth-to-mouth anymore. You just do the compression. So I start CPR, and I'm helping pump oxygen through him and trying to revive him. If the guy next to him on the bullpen gets mad and says, well, how come that's not happening for me? How come I'm not getting that? Well, the coach's responsibility is to know when that player needs what they need and give it to them at that moment. I would tell guys, you're operating out of a sense of fair and equal. What I give to a player based on technology, whatever that is, I don't care what you want to talk about, from Rapsodo to anything else. If this is something that he's ready for and he's shown he needs it and wants to have a better understanding of it, then I give it to him. But if that's not where this guy is at next to him, yet he thinks he wants to be, we have to help him understand that that's where he's at right now. You're not there yet. That means it's a tough conversation. You know, hey, I don't think you're ready for some of that yet because you're still trying to master a good bullpen routine. Let's not go down the road of adding technology to it. You need to understand what a good bullpen routine looks like. Well, how do you know I don't have a good bullpen routine? Well, because you just threw 30 pitches and you threw 11 strikes out of 30. That's not a good bullpen routine. And there's nobody standing in the batter's box. So let's understand a good bullpen routine. Then you have to have a different conversation. It's about knowing how to talk to that guy and what he needs. What he thinks he needs at that moment may not be what he really needs. And that's your job as a coach, to help him. Doesn't mean he won't get there, but you understand, what I'm getting at.
No, I mean, it doesn't matter the age yet. I like the fair versus unfair because that's at any age. I've never thought of it. I'm going to probably have to rewatch this because I'm getting all kinds of good stuff. All right, let's see. Let's see. I think at the pro level, trying to think of how to ask this, how to pose the question. It seems like mainstream media says pro guys or pro organizations are bad about giving any attention to all their players because there's so many of them and they just don't give much attention to them. They either don't help them or restrict them. You don't have to necessarily say what you guys do with the Rockies specifically, but what's the reality of that? Because I know that's not the case, but what's the reality going on?
Well, I can't speak for 29 other clubs. I can tell you, like I just answered the question, you've got to be a good teacher. In order to be a good teacher, you know how to identify what your athlete needs and when they need it. And I think that, restricting athletes, and I know that means that some people say, oh, well, they don't let them go to, Driveline, or they don't let them go to to Randy Sullivan and the Florida Baseball Ranch, and they don't let them do blah 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 blah. Long toss, I believe and I'm very comfortable with sharing that, we look at anything and everything that we believe is going to help benefit our players. Our players are already doing it at certain levels. Our guys are doing certain things. We have to be open to what is it that the player needs. You know what? Some guys may go to some of those different things I've talked about, and that may not be the best thing for them. If they think it is, then we have to work within that framework of where they think they are. Again, that guy says, I want the technology in front of me, but in the last bullpen, he threw 11 out of 30 pitches for strikes. He's not ready for the technology. That guy's not ready to embark on what it means to be consistent and going to a training program, and there are great training programs out there. We talk to our guys about a lot of it. Our strength and conditioning people, Gabe Bauer, our major league strength coach, is a tremendous guy. Mike Jasperson does a tremendous job. Trevor Schwartz is our minor league performance coordinator. These guys are phenomenal. I've been around a lot of really quality people, and they're phenomenal at what they do, and how they work with our athletes, and the different methodologies that we implement and utilize. So I would say that being well-rounded as a coach is vital. Having a big tool belt, having a lot of tools to dive into. Alan Yeager is a very good friend of mine. I mean, I text with Alan Yeager probably 3 or 4 times a week. And he, everybody has this idea that Alan Yeager on long toss, this and that, and he wants every guy, hey, people have to understand there are a lot of really good things with long toss. What it teaches the body, how it teaches the body to organize and to utilize that individual body's muscle abilities and strength abilities. And we have flexibility within our program for our guys because of that very reason. Now, does that mean everybody has to blanket it? No, you can't do that. And so we're open to what our guys are doing, and we communicate with them, and they communicate with us.
Yeah, what I've admired about you and everything that you've spoken so highly of with the Rockies is that, I see you at this conference and watching this video and doing this program just to get exposed to it all. And you've had full support from your organization, and you spoke so highly of them. So it's a testament to what you guys are doing, what you obviously do. You've done that before the Rockies. You'll do it after the Rockies and until oblivion. But I definitely admire that about you. So
I plan to retire with the Rockies.
All right. I love it. So I've got 2 more questions.
Okay.
The first one I have to ask you because it hit me in all the good places when we were talking before we went live. You talked about your practice plans. So our president, Jason Clymore, he always tells our guys, before the season and in multiple times, hey, I've got a list of all my practice plans for everything from the last 15 years. And I thought it was very similar in that you had told me along the same lines, and you've been coaching longer than he has. So tell me about that, to what extent. And then I didn't ask you this, but this was the follow-up question I wanted to ask you is, how do you utilize those going forward? Because they can sit there, but then how do you utilize them?
Yeah. So the first part, the practice plan. So when I, again, started out coaching freshman high school baseball, you're stuck in a small gym. A couple of things that are huge for a coach to be very good at is to be organized. And when you have a limited amount of time and you have a limited space, you have to be more organized. You have to know how to maximize your time and maximize your space. And even in college, when I was coaching at Division II, coaching at the junior college, nothing changed, even though it was 10 years down the road. And now I'm at a junior college, or I'm at a Division I school at Michigan, where I had everything, or I'm at a Division I school at University of Toledo, where we didn't have everything. We were practicing in an arena with, chairs and tables and everything sitting out, and you're up top in in an area hitting in a small area. How do you organize? You have to be organized. I would always say, I think that the most important thing for coaches to understand are a couple of principles. The key for me, one of them is exactly practice organization. What am I doing? How am I doing it? Where am I doing it? Number 2 is, game management. How do I run a game? What do I do? What are my techniques? What are my fundamentals? What are the things that they could expect from me from game management? And number 3 is, how do I manage my personnel? You could say, well, isn't that game management? Well, no, because sometimes guys don't get in games at lower levels. Sometimes guys think they should be in a different role. And so you have to know how to manage your personnel. The one that kind of binds all of those together, especially if you're at the college level, is how do you identify talent? Recruiting. The ability to recruit and identify talent and know what your practice organization is like, know what your game management skills are like, and know what your personnel abilities are and how to manage those personalities, all gets wrapped into your recruiting. Your recruiting and how you identify players and who you want to put on your team. So I have every practice plan that I've ever put together going way back to using, the very first computer. It was called an iPac, or I remember it was brown. I can't remember the stupid name of the old thing, but using at that time just a simple typing document, a typewriter to start with before I got the computer to use, to type out everything on there. And I have every single practice plan over a 25-year career, even what I've done in pro ball, organizing minor league spring training. I've organized several minor league spring trainings. I've organized extended spring trainings. I've organized high school. I've organized travel. So I've got all of them. I think it's important to make sure that you're organizing. The second thing is how to utilize them. Sometimes I had practice plans that I thought our guys were ready for, and we jumped in and we got started, and one particular area looked really horrible. If we were doing a fundamental, like a team fundamental, like rundowns can become an ugly thing, especially at lower levels. So if you aren't teaching in a progression to get to the big skill, then you're going to shortchange your athletes on how they execute it when it comes game time. If they don't have the fundamental progressions laid down, and I still use those same ideas in pro ball, progressions in bullpen sessions, progressions in our drill packages, progressions in our pitch packages, everything has a progression. That's how you teach. So having practice plans is vital. I mean, I go out every day with about 5 sheets going out to the field, because I've got guys in groups, I've got guys in different places, I've got coaches in different places, and we're trying to best maximize what guys are doing from one area to the next. So all progression oriented.
Do you go, because I think this is where I try to get some ideas from people, but I think it's an area that I definitely want to work on. I know it's what I want to work on, but do you go back in the archives? Do you have a process about that, or?
Yeah, going back and looking at some things I've done in the past, I try to do that once or twice a month, depending on what we're going to next. So I've got some things that I did with some other organizations that I really liked. For instance, when we put together some of our station work in spring training, and how we want to roll out certain things, whether that be, whatever, sign station, how you want to give signs, which, we do, and how you want to work on what you're doing with pickoff moves. Now that we have the ridiculous rule, I don't know if you've heard or not, but, A ball down to rookie ball, you can't pick off the first base anymore. That's a major league rule. You have to step off first. Not a major league rule, but just an MLB rule, minor league. So anyway, you from your pickoff work to anything that you do, a progression, I go back and look twice a month at old Excel spreadsheets that I have on station work, and whether it was starters and relievers, or whether it was however we broke it down, and how we were going to do it, and what was the progression from week to week. Just to review, see where I'm at. Maybe there's something I want to change. Maybe one of our coaches gives us a great idea. I mean, Dave Burba is one of our minor league coaches, pitched 17 or 18 years in the big leagues, and he's one of our rookie ball coaches, and he's thrown some things to me and say, hey, what do you think of this? I wanted to do this, and yeah, let's do it. I like input from our guys, and I like input from coaches. So I go and add something to that Excel spreadsheet to say, hey, let's add this. So it's always about adapting and evolving and finding some things that worked really well.
Oh, I love that. All right, my last topic / question. This is going to be a new one I'm going to start doing with everybody. So it's your opportunity to critique what we're doing as an organization, or add to, if you think we're doing everything perfect, which I'm sure we aren't, because our big thing from a top down is just, we're always trying to, kind of much like yourself, take in as much information, do with it what we can, trying to better ourselves. So just to give you a basic understanding what we do, and I'll get better at probably explain this as I continue to do it. So we've got a mental training component in the off season. We've got our hitting, we've got our pitching, we've got our training. There's a 20-week thing that starts in October, goes all the way up until high school starts. We also train our coaches. We just started going online with that this year for the first time to try to get participation up because it's hard to be on site more often. What else do we do? Obviously, we have weekend practices. We've got all the tournaments and all that kind of stuff. What do you think we're doing wrong? What do you think we can add? What do you think we're doing right? What's your best advice for our organization to improve?
Well, I haven't, dove into specifics that the organization does. But one of the things that I have found, Billy Peterson runs the Diamonds training facility in Grand Rapids. And the Diamond Sports Training tries to take multiple teams and put them together for their practice situations so that you have more coaches involved in what's going on. And that way, coaches get exposed to the way someone might teach something. And instead of doing it individual, Team Johnson practices from 3 to 5, and then, Team Smith practices from 5 to 7, and combine Smith and Johnson's teams, give a little bit more time to their practice time, but you also add more coaches to that and allowing, more interaction within coaching to do that. I think it's tremendous that you have a mental skills component to what guys need. I really believe that because there's so much information available to guys today, that they can get bogged down in running to every little thing that's out there, and that's not probably the best way to go about it. I call it the buckshot approach. You and I go hunting up in Remus, Michigan. We're if we're trying to shoot a deer, a buckshot's probably not the best approach. I don't want 500 things going. I want something very specific. That slug going in there. I don't want a buckshot approach when it comes to that idea with players. So I want to be able to have as a fine ability to work on specific things with guys. But I would say that mental skills part of it is huge to helping guys not run to 500 things. So I think that's great.
All right, well, I've kept you long enough. I'll probably end up calling you right after real quick. But any other quick advice or anything you want to share or want to get out there?
I would just say, for players, you got to believe in yourself, but you also have to put the time in, and you got to put quality time in. You can spend an hour doing something that's, only going to give you a small reward. You've got to put in quality time, and you've got to be consistent. There are a lot of good methods out there for improving, but you've got to be consistent with what you do. You can't run from one program to the next, to the next, to the next. You've got to be consistent if you want to see true gains. Coaches, you want to move from one level to the next. You want to become a varsity high school baseball coach, head coach. You want to go into the college level. You've got to be organized. You've got to put around yourself as many good quality people as you can to learn from. You've got to make sacrifices to improve yourself on a daily basis, and those things will happen. It will. So, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to you, and to hopefully some of the things I said helped your staff and players.
Absolutely. This is going to be something that we might have to make mandatory for our guys to listen to and watch. Maybe make a quiz or something so we can know if they watch it. But I really appreciate it, and looking forward to getting this up live and kind of hopefully making some little snippets too. But I really appreciate it. I'm going to have you stay on right after, but I am going to end this. So we'll see everyone on Friday. It's at 8:30 again. We got Zan Bargsdale catching 101 guys. I'm looking forward to that. So appreciate it, everyone, and we'll see you then.